Good morning. In this presentation, we will be taking a look at a concept known as autocratic innovations and how it can help us better understand the democratic backsliding we have been witnessing in countless nations all over the world. Indeed, the quality of democracy has been in decline in as many as 80 countries, according to Freedom House, and this is not limited to specific regions or particular trajectories. In the face of these developments, our existing vocabulary has proved to be inadequate in capturing the essence of this unfolding process. The concept of autocratic innovations seeks to remedy this deficiency. The idea is introduced by Nicole Curato from the Center for Deliberative Democracy and Global Governance at the University of Canberra and Diego Fossati from the Department of Asian and International Studies at the City University of Hong Kong. Leigh Morgenbesser of Griffith University provides us with a concrete menu of such innovations, and Thomas Pepinski of Cornell discusses in his contribution its theoretical foundations and practical implications. The authors developed this idea primarily with reference to Southeast Asia, which they identify as the laboratory for these inventions, but it is also a useful tool to analyze similar developments elsewhere. The word innovation refers not necessarily to the novelty of these methods used by modern-day autocratic governments, but rather the nature of their application. Whereas traditional authoritarian moves are unambiguous and dramatic, authoritarian innovations have a tendency to slip under the radar as they unfold gradually without international fanfare. The key lies not in silencing critics, but managing them. Opposition need not be eliminated when it can be neutered. Intimidation is not required when the same ends can be achieved by encouragement. But to what extent have we failed to anticipate these developments? The existing gamut of grand theories of democratization were not in a position to foresee the counterintuitive directions recent years would take as consolidated democracies eroded and others failed to make much expected democratic gains. The most glaring example of this is of course China, where neither economic prosperity nor any amount of international embeddedness has produced anything resembling a healthy civil society. Instead, the regime's hold on the state is stronger and more absolute than ever. Long-established democracies such as India, European Union member states like Poland and Hungary, the very beacon of democracy, the United States itself, have all succumbed to the charms of populism. Countries that have benefited most from globalization have come to resent it and yearn for a more restrictive and inward-looking polity. It seems that there is very little, if anything, in the toolkit of the academic and the analyst that could have prepared them to predict this anti-democratic turn in national domestic politics. Theories of democratization have been falsified and their credibility put into question. To understand this concept, let us first consider democratic innovations. Democratic innovations aim to improve the quality of a democracy. They build upon the existing framework to fill in the gaps, and they are designed to facilitate healthy democratic exchange. Their purpose is to move closer to the normative ideals of this system of government and produce the conditions for its evolution and fulfillment. As such, they seek to encourage participation, offer citizens forums to voice their concerns, provide them with reliable and comprehensive information, and attempt to build a civic stakeholder mentality. Once a citizen believes that their opinion matters and that their actions can cause change, they are more likely to continue to express those views and act on them. Autocratic innovations should be understood as a mirror image or an evil twin of democratic innovations. Where the latter are meant to bolster democracy, the former seek to subvert it. They hollow out the existing framework and they create gaps in between them. They shrink spaces for healthy and open exchange and dilute the normative ideals they should in fact seek to fulfill. They sow confusion in the minds of their targets and distract them with alternative facts and disinformation. Once a citizen is convinced that their opinions will not be heard and that their actions are futile, they are more likely to withdraw from the public space rather than make the effort only to be subverted. This points out, among other things, a central dilemma of autocratic techniques, namely that they can be traced back to democratic architects. One would indeed be hard-pressed to think of any democratic institutions that cannot be perverted this way. Take, for example, the very primary objective of autocratic practices, that is, to restrict public participation. One need not think long to see how a discourse of participation can be co-opted and twisted by autocratic actors. After all, the very idea of representative democracy implies restrictions on participation. Who is to say that one kind of restriction is permitted and another kind perverted? Is it not in the interests of the aspirational citizens of an ambitious state to streamline its decision-making and minimize the frustrations associated with finding consensus? Autocrats can use such tropes and rhetorical devices to mirror the jargon of democracy and make a mockery of it. To the outside observer, they appear to be engaging with the public, but the public they engage is an extension of the state, orchestrated to create precisely this illusion, as is the case with Weibo, the Chinese message board. They can create horizontal and vertical structures of accountability precisely to prevent the actual practice of it. But one must remember that the focus here, first and foremost, is on practices and habits, rather than regime types, institutions, or individual leaders. Under what type of regime or under which leader these practices emerge is wholly beside the point. Practices are inextricably bound with the local case-specific context. As such, they are hard to capture in data sets and must be sought on the ground. The method is qualitative rather than quantitative. The unit of analysis is smaller than the structure of the state, but larger than the individuals occupying it. These innovations take place at the intersection between macro-political conditions and quotidian micro-political decisions. Habits are created slowly by pushing the boundaries till they become ritualized patterns of interaction governing political life. They might often only be discovered once it is too late. The surest way to identify an authoritarian innovation is to ask whether it serves authoritarian ends. Illiberal practices as such that do not serve to restrict participation or evade responsibility must not be understood as autocratic inventions. Lee Morgenbesser identifies the 5 forms such tactics can take: informational, legal, political, reputational, and technological. From this menu of tools available to autocrats, it is evident that it is all too easy to manage and manipulate institutions instead of having to abolish them. Think tanks and PR firms based in Western capitals can be employed as contractors to polish the image of a rogue regime and produce uncritical reports that whitewash abuses of power. The evolving legal infrastructure to govern the use of technology offers them plausible deniability for censorship. More and more issues may be deemed too sensitive for open discussion. Some of them may be injurious to collective security, yet others might be in contravention of phantom laws enacted to outlaw their open discussion. Among the many examples outlined in this study, perhaps the clearest is the use of libel and defamation lawsuits. As can be seen, imprisonment and travel bans have gone out of fashion. Assassinations have all but disappeared. Yet silencing and censorship has succeeded by other means. Another chart demonstrates the dubious and non-existent correlation between ratification of international treaties and respect for civil liberties. Countries that have lagged behind continue to lag behind. Countries with an imperfect but possible record continue to be imperfect. Countries with a notable absence of any respect for human rights continue to disregard them blatantly. Common to all of them is the apparent acceptance of more and more international standards. This, however, has not led to any change in their behavior. As a rapidly increasing number of countries choose to prioritize national identity and social stability over civil liberties and political rights, these autocratic innovations may become the norm and require a watchful eye keeping track of seemingly minor infractions. The starting point of most research on democracy, whether it's erosion or consolidation, has been to examine the basic tenets of democracy, such as the credibility of elections, the independence of institutions, or the protection of civil rights. More subtle aspects of democratic practice, such as deliberation, cost of participation, and responsiveness, have received comparatively lesser attention. The concept of autocratic innovations encourages us to look beyond these nominal categories. Practice of governance is subject to a variety of everyday decisions. Innovative autocrats have discovered that they need not tamper with the written rules and formal practices of democracy, but are free to trample on the unwritten rules and informal practices thereof. They shun having to resort to regressive measures such as overtly violent repression, but choose to render critics and opposition irrelevant through calibrated harassment. The most insidious part of these moves is that they are cloaked in the rhetoric of democracy and claim to act in its interest. If you liked this video, share it with your friends and check out some of the other ones. Goodbye.